They're asking about you. The same people who acted like you didn't exist. The same ones who walked past you like you were invisible, who chose everyone else, who made you feel like you were too much or not enough, or just simply the wrong person at the wrong time. They are asking about you now. Quietly, carefully, like they already know the answer is going to sting. And chosen one, you don't have to say a word, because your life is already saying everything for you. Number one, they didn't lose you. They released something they were never equipped to hold. Let's start with the truth that no one wants to say out loud, but everyone in your position needs to hear. The people who let you go, who moved on, who chose differently, who treated you like an option when you were showing up as a priority, they didn't make a mistake about you. They made a revelation about themselves. And that distinction matters more than you know. A mistake means they had the capacity to value you correctly and simply miscalculated. But that is not what happened. What happened is simpler and more honest. They were not built for what you bring. Not at that time, not at that level. Not with the tools they had in that season of their own lives. You were carrying something they couldn't hold. Not because it was too heavy in a negative sense, but because it required a specific kind of strength, emotional depth, and self-awareness to receive properly. And they didn't have that yet. You have probably spent more time than you should have trying to understand what you did wrong. Replaying moments, wondering if you were too open, too honest, too available, too real, wondering if you should have been different, said less, needed less, wanted less, and the answer to all of those questions is the same. No, you were not the problem. You were the standard, and they couldn't meet it. There is a specific kind of grief that chosen ones carry that most people don't fully understand. It is not just the grief of losing someone. It is the grief of knowing you gave something real and watching it be treated as ordinary, of opening up completely and watching someone use that openness casually, of seeing clearly what something could have been, and knowing the other person either couldn't see it or saw it and still chose to walk away. That grief is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged, not bypassed. But here is what is also real. The version of you that is standing on the other side of that grief is not diminished by it. It is defined by it in the best possible way. Every time you loved fully and it wasn't matched, you proved something important about your own capacity. Every time you showed up with integrity and it wasn't honored, you demonstrated something about your character that time and distance will make undeniable. Every time you chose to remain real when the easier option was to become bitter, you chose the harder and more powerful path. They didn't lose something they were careless with. They released something they were never capable of keeping. And the city is starting to understand that now. Number two, you kept growing while they stayed in the same conversation. Here is what nobody talks about when someone walks away from a chosen one. The trajectory difference, the gap that opens up over time between the person who left and the person they left. Because chosen ones don't stop when they are walked away from. They don't collapse into the loss and stay there. They grieve, they feel it fully, and then they grow. And they grow in ways that would be shocking to the people who thought leaving them was a neutral decision. While they were still talking about you in the past tense, you were becoming something they don't have language for yet. While they were explaining their choice to leave as if it were logical and comfortable, you were doing the quiet, hard, unsexy work of evolution. While they were keeping their life exactly the same patterns, same conversations, same ceiling, you were breaking through every ceiling that had ever been placed above you. Growth is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like nothing is happening from the outside. You wake up, you do the work, you face yourself, you make better decisions, you let go of what is shrinking you, you hold on to what is building you. Day after day after day with no audience and no applause and no one watching closely enough to notice the transformation until one day they look up and the person they thought they knew is standing somewhere they never imagined you would reach. That is the moment happening now. They looked up, and you are not where they left you. You are not in the same emotional space. You are not in the same mental space. You are not operating at the same level. You have moved in ways that are quiet but undeniable. And now the gap between where you are and where they expected you to remain is too wide to pretend it isn't there. The city sees the gap, and the city is reckoning with what it means. Number three, the version of you they dismissed became the version that couldn't be ignored. Think about the specific version of yourself that was present when people underestimated you, when they passed you over, when they chose someone else, when they made it clear in 100 small ways that they didn't see you as the standout. That version of you was real and present and doing everything it knew how to do. And still, it wasn't enough for them. Now think about who you are now, not in comparison to others, in comparison to that earlier version. The clarity you have now that you didn't have then. The boundaries you hold now that you were still learning to find then. The energy you carry now that has been refined through every experience you survived. The knowing, the groundedness, the quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself because it simply is. That version of you, the one standing now, is the version that answers the question everyone kept asking about you with evidence instead of argument. You don't have to tell anyone who you are anymore. You just have to show up and let them see. And what they see is the direct result of everything they dismissed when they had access to your process. They missed the building. Now they are looking at the building and trying to understand how it got there without them. There is a specific look that people get when they realize they made a profound miscalculation. It is not loud. It is quiet. It is the moment when their public narrative about why they walked away from you collides with the private reality of who you have become. That collision is not comfortable for them, and it is not something they share easily. But it is happening in quiet moments, in honest conversations with themselves, in the gap between who they told everyone you were and who you are clearly showing the world you are. The version they dismissed is now the version that enters rooms and changes the temperature. The version they didn't choose is now the one that others are actively choosing. The version they treated as ordinary has become the evidence that their judgment was never about your value. It was always about their vision. Number 4. What they called your flaw was actually the signature they couldn't duplicate. Every chosen one has something, a quality that made people uncomfortable before they understood it. Something that read as too much in environments that were too small. The depth that felt like a burden when people wanted surface. The intensity that felt like pressure when people wanted ease. The standards that felt like judgment when people were comfortable being mediocre. The sensitivity that felt like instability when people had never experienced someone who actually felt things fully. In every environment that was not right for you, that quality was the reason for the friction. It was what made you stand out in ways that made certain people uncomfortable. And because discomfort is easier to manage when you label it a problem, they labeled it your flaw. They called it your issue. They said you were the difficult one, the complicated one, the one who made things harder than they needed to be. But here is what they didn't understand. That quality they called your flaw was your signature. It was the specific thing about you that no one else in the room was carrying in the same way. It was the thing that, when placed in the right environment, in the right relationships, with the right people who were operating at the right level, would become not the source of friction, but the source of extraordinary impact. The depth that felt like a burden to shallow people is the same depth that creates connections so real and lasting that the people who experience them carry them for decades. The intensity that felt like pressure to the comfortable is the same intensity that drives results and builds things that last. The standards that felt like judgment to the mediocre are the same standards that create environments of excellence that elevate everyone who genuinely wants to rise. The sensitivity that felt like instability to the numb is the same sensitivity that allows you to read, understand, and connect with people at a level that feels like being truly seen for the first time. The city is looking at your signature now, not as a flaw to be managed, as a quality to be valued. And the people who called it your problem are quietly reckoning with the fact that the problem was never yours. It was theirs. Number 5. They tried to tell the story of you, but you wrote the ending yourself. People talk, especially when they leave, especially when the choice they made needed to be justified by a narrative that made you the reason. And if you have been in spaces where people walked away and then told their version of the story, you know exactly how that goes. Suddenly you were the difficult one. Suddenly you were the one who made things complicated. Suddenly the reason for the exit was entirely about your shortcomings and entirely disconnected from their own. That narrative gets shared. It finds its way through conversations and communities and into the ears of people who only ever knew you through someone else's perception of you. And for a period of time, that narrative shapes how you are seen. Not because it is true, but because they got to speak first and loudest and with the confidence of someone who believes their own version so completely that it never occurs to them to question it. But here is what narratives cannot survive: time and evidence. Time reveals character in ways that words never can. And the evidence of your life, the way you continue to show up, the way you continue to build, the way you continue to treat people with integrity even after you have been treated without it, that evidence writes a counter-narrative that is louder than any version they told. Not because you are shouting it, because you are living it every day, consistently, without apology and without performance. The story they told about you was written for an audience that was never meant to hold your permanent perception anyway. The story your life is telling now is written in the kind of ink that does not fade. It is written in results, in relationships, in the testimony of people who have actually experienced who you are without the filter of someone else's hurt feelings or defensive narrative. And the city is starting to read both stories side by side, and the comparison is doing everything you never had to do yourself. Number 6, their realization came with a cost they are now paying quietly. Let's talk about what happens inside the people who realize too late, because it is not nothing, and it is not simple, and it does not look the way movies make it look, with dramatic confessions and public apologies and sweeping gestures of recognition. It is quieter than that, more private, and in many ways more significant. It happens in a moment when they see something you have done, something you have built, somewhere you have arrived, and the thought that arrives before they can stop it is one they were not prepared for. That could have been mine. Or I had that and I didn't know what it was. Or I treated that like it was replaceable and now I am seeing what it actually was. That thought is not comfortable, and it does not arrive once and leave. It comes back in moments of comparison between what they chose and what they could have chosen, in moments of loneliness when they reach for connection and find something that does not go as deep as what they once had, in moments of honest self-reflection when the story they have been telling themselves starts to develop cracks that are hard to look away from. They pay a cost that is invisible to everyone else and entirely real to them. And it is not a cost you caused or a cost you need to feel guilty about. It is the natural consequence of releasing something rare without understanding its rarity until it was no longer available. You don't need them to suffer. You don't need the apology. You don't need the dramatic realization to be delivered to your door. What you have, which is incomparably more valuable than their regret, is your life as it is now, growing, building, expanding, full of the kind of depth and direction that they will spend a long time trying to find in something or someone else. The cost they are paying is none of your business and none of your burden, but it is real, and the city sees it, even when no one says it directly. Number 7, you never needed the city's validation, but you have earned its respect. Here is the distinction that matters most right now. There is a difference between needing validation and having earned respect. Needing validation is asking the world to confirm your value before you can believe it yourself. It is living in a state of perpetual waiting for external permission to occupy your own life fully. It is shrinking and expanding based on the temperature of other people's opinion of you. That is not where you are anymore. That may have been a stop on the journey, a season where the outside world's perception had more power over your internal state than it should have. But that is not the current location. The current location is somewhere entirely different. Earned respect is different. It does not ask, it does not wait, it does not negotiate. It simply exists as the natural byproduct of showing up consistently with integrity, with depth, with the kind of character that holds in both the easy moments and the hard ones. Earned respect is what happens when the evidence of your life speaks loudly enough that the people who encounter it cannot reasonably dispute what it is saying about you. You have been building that evidence, not for the city, for yourself, because the version of you that acts with integrity when no one is watching and performs with integrity when everyone is watching is the same version. Consistent, not managed, not performed, just real, and the city is watching now. Not because you demanded its attention, because your life has become the kind of thing that draws attention naturally, the kind of story people lean toward, the kind of presence that arrives in a room and makes people want to understand the journey, the kind of chosen one energy that cannot be manufactured, borrowed, or faked. You never needed the city to see you. But chosen one, it is seeing you now. And what it is seeing is not the version of you that can be dismissed or overlooked or conveniently minimized. It is the version that is simply impossible to miss. Number 8. The ones who messed up something real always come back to the scene of what they lost. There is a pattern that chosen ones see repeatedly in their lives, and it never fully loses its power to be both validating and bittersweet. The people who leave do not always stay gone forever. Not physically, not energetically. They circle back. Sometimes directly with a message or a call or a sudden reappearance in spaces they know you inhabit, sometimes indirectly through mutual connections or through the quiet monitoring of your life from a comfortable digital distance. And when they come back, whatever form that return takes, they come back to the scene of what they lost. They are not coming back to you, the person you are now. They are coming back because the ghost of what they walked away from has been following them. The memory of the connection, the quality, the depth, the realness of what existed when you were in each other's lives. They are trying to return to that feeling even though the circumstances that created it were a specific combination of time, growth, and alignment that cannot simply be reconstructed by showing up again. You need to understand something about this return. It is not evidence that they have changed enough to deserve access. It is evidence that they remember what was real. And while remembering is something, it is not the same as becoming. It is not the same as doing the internal work that would make them capable of honoring what they once held carelessly. You are not required to receive them back simply because they have realized what they had. You are not required to open the door simply because they are now knocking with more awareness than they knocked with before. What you are required to do is trust your own discernment. Trust the version of yourself that has grown through the absence of what they took when they left. Trust the clarity you have built in the space they created when they chose to go. If they have truly changed, that change will be evident in ways that don't require you to take their word for it. And if they haven't, the same patterns that existed before will show up again in new packaging. Your discernment, chosen one, is sharper than it has ever been. Trust it. Number 9. Your silence was never weakness. It was the loudest thing in the room. In the time since things changed, since certain people left, or certain chapters closed, or certain environments revealed themselves to be too small for what you were becoming, you may have been quiet, not performing grief, not broadcasting your process, not explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand anyway, just quiet, present inside your own life in a way that didn't require external validation or an audience or anyone's approval to be real. That silence was misread by many. Silence from a chosen one makes people uncomfortable because they cannot monitor what they cannot see. They don't know if you are okay or not okay, healing or deteriorating, thriving or struggling. The ambiguity is unsettling to people who relied on being able to track you, and so they filled in the silence with whatever narrative served them best. But here is what the silence actually was. It was the loudest thing in the room. Because in a world where everyone is performing their pain and their healing and their growth for an audience, choosing to simply live your experience privately is the most radical act of self-possession available. It means you are not doing this for anyone else. Not the comeback, not the growth, not the becoming. You are doing it because it is yours to do, because the life being lived is your life and not a content piece or a proof or a performance for the people who doubted you. That silence built something inside you that noise cannot build. Focus, depth, the kind of inner certainty that comes from choosing your own processing over the immediate relief of external validation. And now when you step forward and the world begins to see what the silence was building, the reveal is not dramatic because you planned it to be. It is powerful because it is simply true. The city heard your silence, and it is still listening. Number 10. What you are carrying now is not what you were carrying when they knew you. The person they messed up something real with is not the same person standing here now. Not because you have changed who you fundamentally are, because you have become more fully who you always were. Every layer of conditioning, every habit that was inherited instead of chosen, every belief that belonged to someone else's fear and not your actual capacity, the work you have done in this season has shed what was never authentically yours and clarified what always was. What you are carrying now is lighter in the ways that matter and deeper in the ways that count. Lighter, because you are no longer holding the weight of other people's versions of you, no longer managing the exhausting gap between who you actually are and who you were trying to be in environments that required a reduced version of yourself. No longer spending energy on proving, explaining, or justifying your value to people who had already decided their answer. Deeper, because every experience you have moved through has added to the real version of you. Every time you survived something you weren't sure you would survive, it expanded your capacity. Every time you chose integrity in a moment when dishonesty would have been easier, it strengthened your character. Every time you showed up for yourself when no one else was, it deepened your relationship with your own worth in a way that nothing external can touch. The person they remember and the person you are now share a name and a face and a fundamental nature. But the version that is stepping forward into the season carries a weight of experience, growth, and earned wisdom that changes the entire encounter. They are about to meet someone they thought they knew and discover they were only ever meeting the preview. The full version is here now, and it is everything the preview suggested it would be and more than they had the imagination to anticipate. Number 11. The city doesn't just see what you become, it feels what it missed. There is a difference between recognition and feeling. Recognition is intellectual. It looks at evidence and draws a conclusion. It sees the results of your growth and files it under, yes, they did well for themselves. That is one thing. And it is fine. Recognition is neutral. It observes without emotional content. But feeling is something else entirely. Feeling is when the encounter with who you are now creates an internal response that is not just intellectual. It moves something. It creates something in the chest, in the gut, in the quiet place where honest self-accounting happens. Feeling is what occurs when someone looks at what they walked away from, and the distance between what they chose and what they released becomes impossible to intellectualize away. The city is not just recognizing you anymore, it is feeling you, feeling the gap, feeling the weight of what was there that is not there anymore, feeling the specific texture of what it is like to be in the presence of someone who has grown beyond what they were expected to stay. And feeling creates movement in people, not always the right movement, not always in ways that serve you, but movement. People start reaching when feeling sets in. Conversations that went quiet for months or years suddenly reopen. Opportunities appear from directions that were previously closed. Attention arrives from people who weren't paying it before. Not all of that attention is worth receiving, but all of it is confirmation. Confirmation that the work was real, the growth was real, the becoming was real, and the life you are now living, chosen one, is real in a way that moves people even when they cannot fully explain why. Number 12. You were never the one who needed to be found. You were the destination they needed to earn. Let's correct something that may have been quietly living in the back of your mind. The idea that the goal is to be found, to be discovered, to finally have the right person or the right opportunity or the right environment recognize you, and in that recognition, bring completion to something that has felt incomplete. That idea is understandable. It comes from a real place of wanting to be seen by something worthy of the seeing. But it is built on a foundation that puts your completion in someone else's hands, and that is not where it belongs. You are not the one who needs to be found. You are the one who has been doing the finding. Finding yourself, your depth, your standards, your vision, your capacity. Finding the edges of what you are willing to accept and the core of what you are not willing to compromise. Finding the version of yourself that exists on the other side of every loss, every disappointment, every moment of being underestimated, every season of being overlooked. That version, the one you have found through all of that finding, is not something to be discovered by someone else and then finally validated into existence. It already exists. It has been existing. The city's realization that they messed up something real does not create your value. It reflects it back. The reflection is satisfying, but the value was never dependent on the reflection. You are the destination that certain people, the right ones, the aligned ones, the ones who have done enough work on themselves to be capable of meeting you fully, are earning their way toward. Not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through consistent growth, through honest self-examination, through becoming the kind of person who is worthy of the depth you bring. You don't go looking for them. You continue becoming who